the 2026 unsealed files regarding the Jeffrey Epstein network finally dropped, I think, most people assumed we were just going to get a straightforward ledger.
Right, like financial crimes or a list of high-profile associates.
Exactly. We expected wire fraud. But that's just not what happened at all. Instead, we are looking at this massive 7,622-acre property, Zorro Ranch, in the New Mexico high desert. And the data coming out of it is completely shattering our understanding of this network.
It really is. I mean, the sheer volume and, frankly, the horrific nature of new data is just staggering. We're not just talking about offshore accounts anymore. We're confronting the discovery of victim diaries, a massive ongoing physical search of the property, and this is wild, the deeply anomalous deaths and disappearances of 14 advanced defense scientists.
Which brings us to the core of our discussion today. We're looking at the operation at Zorro Ranch, known in the intelligence dossiers as the Dragon Nest. And the question we have to answer is, well, what was the true primary objective of this network?
Right, because there's a serious split in how to interpret this new evidence.
Exactly. And when I look at these 2026 files, the conclusion is inescapable to me. This elite syndicate was fundamentally a compromised military-industrial pipeline. They were using blackmail to covertly fund and protect black-budget aerospace and advanced AI technologies.
Yeah, and I completely disagree. I mean, if you focus just on the technology and the rockets, you are missing the graveyard they're built on.
You think the tech is just a smokescreen?
I think that technological framing obscures a much darker foundational pathology. The primary purpose of Zorro Ranch was biological and social subjugation. It was a transhumanist eugenics project focused on breeding, trafficking, and engineering compliant human subjects.
I see why you think that, but let me give you a different perspective. We have to look at the scale of the multi-decade military-industrial compromise here. The theory I'm presenting is that this network provided the blackmail leverage and, the dark money infrastructure required to control elite defense figures.
Specifically those overseeing unacknowledged special access programs, right? The USAPs?
Yes, the off-the-books research projects. How does a blackmail ring turn into a parallel R&D pipeline? Well, by compromising the gatekeepers. If you have leverage over the people controlling USAPs, you can divert resources to a dark money R&D network out in the Southwest Corridor. And they were specifically funding next-generation aerospace tech.
Wait, you're talking about the propulsion stuff?
Yeah, plasma fusion, anti-gravity, and pyrophoric superalloys.
And that is where we get the term dragon's breath, right? I want to make sure we're clear on what that actually means mechanically.
Oh, absolutely. So in metallurgical engineering, heavy metals like hafnium and zirconium are critical for building advanced aerospace components. They are highly pyrophoric, meaning when they're machined into a fine dust, they spontaneously ignite in the air.
Wow.
Yeah. And that phenomenon is casually referred to by engineers as a dragon's breath reaction. But in the context of Zorro Ranch and the Dragon Nest, it's also a tactical term. Because as the 2026 files threatened to expose this dark money R&D pipeline, the elites initiated a burn protocol.
A metaphorical dragon's breath.
Precisely. They built a wall of fire to scorch the earth and liquidate their intellectual assets while keeping the technology.
Look, I understand the allure of the geopolitical espionage angle, and the terminology is certainly dramatic. But the true horror of this network lies in its biological atrocities. Right now, as we speak, there is a state-level raid happening at Zorro Ranch.
True, the local authorities are moving in.
And that raid wasn't triggered by missing rocket schematics or, plasma fusion data. It was triggered by a tip about 2 buried women. We really have to look at the newly released victim diaries.
The visceral nature of those diaries is undeniable, I'll give you that.
They are just horrifying. I mean, these are real-time records naming elites like Mr. Leonis, Dan Snyder, and former Senator George Mitchell. But more importantly, we have the physical evidence recovered from the ranch's white yurt.
The medical facility on site?
Exactly. We are talking about medical records, ultrasound prints, and prenatal checkup logs.
But let me ask you this. How did they physically get the victims there without triggering federal trafficking flags or FAA alarms?
Well, that's where the logistics shell, SLK Designs, comes in. You use a procurement shell to mask the movement of human beings as corporate travel or consulting logistics. The flight logs show that on August 1, 1997, a pilot flew a 16-year-old girl named Christy Rogers to Zorro, which is the internal flight abbreviation for Zorro Ranch.
And she never left.
There is no return flight on that log, none. The diary entries agonizingly describe these girls being used as literal vessels or incubators. I mean, this wasn't just a brothel, it was a breeding facility.
Right.
The network wasn't just building rockets, it was fulfilling a perverse obsession with eugenics and seeding the elite's DNA. The advanced aerospace technology was just a byproduct of men who believed they were gods, operating with terrifying impunity over human biology.
That's an interesting point, though. I would frame it differently. We have to look at the evasion signatures and the sheer scale of the 14 liquidated scientists. Let me just walk you through the breakdown of these 14 because it is not random.
It's definitely a specific cohort.
Very specific. 6 of them are directly tied to NASA, JPL, or Caltech. We have Monica Riza, a NASA JPL metallurgist and materials engineer who vanished in June 2025. You have Joshua LeBlanc, an electrical engineer at the NASA Marshall Space Flight Center, dead in a car crash.
And Michelle David Hicks, the planetary scientist.
Right, dead. Frank Mywald, a JPL imaging spectroscopy engineer, dead.
And you're arguing this all ties into the space shuttle era ending?
Precisely. If there is a space shuttle sunsetting, panic-like, a scramble for next-generation orbital platforms where deep space propulsion, this is the exact talent pool that a shadow network would recruit or silence. We also have Ning Li and Amy Eskridge, both anti-gravity researchers, both dead.
Under highly suspicious circumstances. Yeah.
Exactly. Anthony Cheves and Melissa Casillas from Los Alamos National Laboratory vanished. Stephen Garcia, a nuclear components expert, vanished. Jason Thomas, a chemical biology director, found drowned. Matthew Sullivan from the Air Force, dead. And Carl Grillmeyer, a Caltech dark matter astrophysicist, murdered.
I mean, it's just this incredibly dense cluster of, highly specific intellectual capital.
And it intersects perfectly with the network's funding. Look at Loureiro. He was an MIT plasma physicist and the leader of the MIT Plasma Science and Fusion Center, killed in a shooting in December 2025. We know from the unsealed documents that Epstein had massive, deeply documented financial ties to MIT.
Specifically through the Media Lab, yeah.
Yes, this was the parallel R&D pipeline in action. Cartels or standard human traffickers don't target dark matter scientists and MIT plasma physicists. Intelligence networks protecting proprietary tech do.
Well, I come at it from a different way. I acknowledge the scientists' deaths, and the breakdown of those NASA and MIT connections is undeniably chilling. But I insist that the geopolitical maneuvering is secondary to the raw reality documented in those diaries.
How so?
You're looking at the clean, sterile world of aerospace physics, but the core of Zorro Ranch was drowning in blood and trauma.
Can we just pause on General McCausland for a second, though? He was the former commander of the Air Force Research Laboratory. He vanished from his home in Albuquerque in a highly compressed 54-minute window.
Right.
He left behind his phone, his smartwatch, his prescription glasses, everything that could digitally or physically track him. But he took a .38 caliber revolver and his hiking boots. I mean, that is terrifyingly deliberate. That is a highly disciplined evasion strategy or a surgical extraction.
Look, I'm not denying the discipline of the extractions. What I'm saying is that to replace the chemical rocket era with plasma fusion is, at the end of the day, just commerce. It's moving machinery. Listen to the exact words of the victim in the Zorro Ranch Journal.
Go ahead.
She wrote, "I no longer feel like a person, but a vessel. Will they take this one too?" She writes about the sound of a heartbeat on a sonogram and agonizing over where the first baby went. The true elite power play wasn't advanced propulsion. It was the absolute godlike control over human reproduction and the creation of a traumatized biological underclass.
I'm not convinced by that line of reasoning because you cannot separate the commerce from the control. The individuals named in those diaries, the billionaires, the hedge fund managers, the defense contractors, are the exact same entities who require those defense contracts and advanced technology to maintain their global sovereignty.
I see the overlap, but
They intersect perfectly. And when that intersection was threatened by the 2026 unsealed files, they didn't just quietly liquidate the scientists. They deployed what intelligence analysts call kinetic containment.
I think we need a clear definition of that for everyone.
Absolutely. Kinetic containment basically means starting a massive, highly visible fire over in the neighbor's yard so that absolutely no one looks at the vault you are currently emptying.
Okay.
It's the ultimate media distraction, and we saw this deployed perfectly with the Nancy Guthrie abduction.
Wait, let's back up. How exactly does the violent abduction of an 84-year-old woman physically or digitally distract from the Zorro Ranch files?
Because of who her family is. In February 2026, Nancy Guthrie was violently abducted from her home in a zero-trace extraction. Her son-in-law is Michael Feldman, who co-founded the Glover Park Group. The unsealed emails show Larry Summers explicitly advised Epstein to use that exact PR firm for crisis management.
So you're saying a PR firm orchestrated a kidnapping?
Now, I'm saying the intelligence apparatus protecting this network orchestrated the kidnapping. And the PR connections ensured it created a blinding media firestorm. They don't do the muscle, they manage the media shockwave to ensure it buries the Epstein file release. And we see this shadow operation extending to their logistical cleanup, too. Look at the concept of a node deletion. This is when an intelligence network cuts a compromised logistical link out of their supply chain with extreme prejudice. We saw it in Chihuahua, Mexico.
Oh, the convoy crash.
Yes. A clandestine convoy of 5 vehicles goes off a 600-foot ravine at 2 a.m., and the lead truck entirely incinerates itself, killing 2 CIA operatives. Chihuahua is the direct transit corridor from the American Southwest. That isn't a traffic accident, that is a synchronized node deletion.
To hide the assets.
Exactly. Designed to permanently conceal the identities of high-value assets or extracted personnel, possibly some of those missing scientists. They are systematically protecting the tech pipeline.
I'm sorry, but I just don't buy that. Let me tell you why.
All right.
The distraction theory, the kinetic containment, the node deletions, it gives this network far too much credit for brilliant, omnipotent intelligence tradecraft. It completely ignores their sheer brute force bureaucratic impunity. You don't need a synchronized CIA node deletion when the federal government simply refuses to do its job.
You're referring to the 2019 raid or, well, lack thereof.
Exactly. Look at the timeline. In July 2019, when Epstein was arrested, the FBI had the optimal window to search that 26,000 square foot mansion at Zorro Ranch. It was sitting right there. But the DOJ pals reveal they claimed no probable cause and just walked away.
They did.
They allowed the entire interior of the ranch to be scrubbed. The cover-up wasn't a masterful intelligence maneuver. It was institutional paralysis protecting a graveyard.
The institutional protection is certainly a factor, I agree.
It's the defining factor. And look at where we are now. In 2026, state investigators are reduced to using ground-penetrating radar out in the desert at a location called the Cistern Site. They are desperately hunting for the physical remains of 16-year-old Christy Rogers and the unidentified second girl trafficked in August 1997.
It's a grim reality.
Right. They aren't looking for anti-gravity schematics in that dirt. They are looking for human bones. Furthermore, look at the murder of Carl Grillmeyer, the Caltech dark matter astrophysicist you mentioned earlier. How was he killed?
He was shot by a 29-year-old local named Freddie Snyder.
Precisely. Which loops right back to the diary naming Dan Snyder as an investor and abuser at the ranch. The establishment narrative claims it's just a deranged neighbor holding a grudge over a trespassing dispute.
Right, that was the official story.
But whether Freddie Snyder is a relative, a fixer, or a coerced asset, it is brute force violence. They aren't executing a masterful 40 chess distraction with PR firms. They are violently, sloppily silencing liabilities because the bodies are literally buried in their backyard. And the ground-penetrating radar is getting closer every single day.
I hear you, but let's follow the logic of the technology to its ultimate endpoint, because I think it actually synthesizes both of our positions. We've talked about the aerospace angle, the space shuttle sunsetting, and the MIT dark money. But it's not just about space.
What else then?
It's about artificial general intelligence and humanoid robotics. I know, connecting a New Mexico ranch to a White House AI presentation sounds like a massive leap, but stay with me. The underlying philosophy here is crucial.
You're talking about the Figure 3 rollout.
Yes. Just recently, First Lady Melania Trump hosted a White House presentation of a humanoid AI robot named Figure 3 and pushed for a robotic educator named Plato. Why is this relevant to Zorro Ranch? Because the ultimate goal of the elitist, the true ideology of what is called the Dark Enlightenment, is to entirely replace messy, democratic human connections with sterile, consumable, and perfectly compliant robotic surrogates.
For those unfamiliar, the Dark Enlightenment is essentially the philosophical belief that democracy is a failed experiment and society should be run by sovereign CEO monarchs who don't answer to a voting public.
Exactly. And you cannot operate as a sovereign CEO monarch if you have to rely on a human workforce that leaks documents, writes diaries, demands rights, and testifies to the FBI. The Epsteins, the Musks, the Thiels, they funded AGI and robotics to build a perfectly compliant underclass. They're trying to design a humanoid to replace the messy liability of actual humans.
That's a compelling argument, but have you considered that the push for humanoid robots is just the sanitized, public-facing version of their darker biological operations?
Wait, how so?
Think about the underlying pathology here. Whether they are engineering sterile, mechanical dolls in Silicon Valley or trapping young girls through exclusionary zoning and coerced teenage pregnancies to serve as biological incubators in New Mexico, the psychological objective is identical.
Wow.
It is the total subjugation of the individual to service the appetites of the technocratic elite. The robotics program is just eugenics rendered in silicon and steel.
That is a staggering synthesis. You're saying the robotics and the trafficking stem from the exact same desire for a compliant subject.
Completely. The elite commentators today lamenting the decline in teen birth rates, the ones arguing that girls should be having kids at 16 or 17, are operating on the same monarch-style control architecture we saw in the unsealed files. They want vulnerable, disenfranchised girls bound to economically advantaged men.
Which circles back to the ranch.
Yes. The 1997 vessels at Zorro Ranch, girls like Christy Rogers, they were the biological prototypes. The humanoid robots like Figure 3 are just the mass-market rollout. The technology is merely the tool they use to enforce their biological and social dominance.
When you step back and look at the friction between these ideas, the dead scientists, the CIA node deletions, the dark enlightening philosophy, it paints a terrifyingly clear picture. The verified data regarding the 14 liquidated aerospace researchers, the deep ties to MIT and JPL, and the deployment of a scorched earth intelligence protocol prove that this network fundamentally operated as a compromised parallel R&D pipeline.
It definitely functioned as one, yes.
They were building dragon's breath technology, pushing the boundaries of plasma fusion and AGI. And when the unsealed files threatened exposure, they initiated a burn protocol to liquidate the intellectual assets and blind the public.
And yet, while that technological pipeline is undeniably real and lethal, I maintain that the true center of gravity remains the unspeakable human cost, the victim diaries, the horrific medical records found in the White Yurt, and the ongoing radar search of the cistern site for the bodies of trafficked girls reveal the network's foundational truth.
The biology.
Right. This was an operation obsessed with transhumanist eugenics. Rockets and robots are just the mechanisms. The subjugation of the human soul, the desire to play God with human biology, is the objective.
It seems we are looking at a scenario where both the technological singularity and biological breeding were utilized to construct an architecture of elite control. And they operated with an impunity that is just hard to even comprehend. I mean, the failure of federal authorities to search that 26,000 square foot mansion back in 2019 allowed this operation to stay buried for another 7 years.
And now, there are millions of pages of documents unsealed. There are independent researchers digging through flight anomalies and corporate shell companies every single day. The truth is finally bleeding out of the margins, and the cover-up is failing.
There is still so much more to explore in this material. For years, we can only see the money and the influence circling the edges of this network. But as the 2026 files pull us closer to the center, past the robotics, the advanced aerospace tech, and the encrypted ledgers, We are finally seeing the core of the operation.
We really are.
And the question we have to leave you with is this. When you stare into the dark center of the Zorro Ranch, are you looking at the terrifying future of our technology or the graveyard of our humanity?